I'm DMing a new campaign, and while prepping for my first session, I started wondering, how do the most celebrated DMs in the world prep for their games? So I decided I'd watch hours of videos of actual players and D&D advice videos from DMs like Mercer and Brennan Mulligan, but also from DMs like Perkins and Crawford, who actually writes the official core rulebooks telling you how to DM. I also grabbed tips from a few surprise DMs too. So let's start with Perkins, who is a game architect at Wizards of the Coast and is probably one of the most consumer-facing DMs who also designs the game itself. Chris has a ton of advice for prepping for D&D games, starting with write out a short list of planned events or encounters that you want to touch on in that session, anticipating where the game is going to go. Very simple basic advice, but it's solid advice. When I prep, I like to think in scenes. I really want 4 scenes to happen this session, in this order. I'm comfortable improvising between those scenes, and the scenes are flexible enough to happen in different places, so the players still have that freedom of movement. But just writing down these scenes beforehand, it makes me think more about them, and that alone gets me in a much better headspace when it comes down to how I want to pace the game, the flow of it. And if the players throw curveballs at me during the game, at least I've thought a little bit about what could happen. I also don't often hit all my planned scenes in that session, usually because of time constraints, or maybe the players go just completely off in a different direction and it's just not viable anymore, and I'm fine with that. You should be okay with either merging scenes or cutting them out entirely, or potentially postponing them to the next session, which is actually a tip I stole from Brennan Mulligan. But we're still on Perkins, whose next hack is to prepare a map for the session. Not even for the players, a map just for you. If you're a visual DM like I am, and you like illustrations to help you describe NPCs, or use battle maps and minis for combat, then you probably also find it useful to have maps of key areas that the players are going to be exploring. I love being able to just look at a map and say, oh yeah, there's 2 doors in this room, one to the north, one to the east, and there's like a pedestal in the center of the room. Then as the players move around this room, I can just visualize much better where they are. And if they split up until the players go into a different room completely, I can still keep track of what is happening way better just by looking at this map. And I especially like using a map for like a city, the different districts, where the different bars are, the different names of things. If you're a DM who doesn't really find visual things that useful, then sure, like a block of text could do the job too. But for me, a visual map just allows me to grab all the information so much faster. And they don't even have to be good maps, it's just for you, so just scroll whatever on a piece of paper. And you can write on them and change them on the fly depending what's happening in the game. Just like you can hit the subscribe button on this channel and then change that back at any point if you change your mind. During this prep time, Perkins also writes out recaps. He suggests doing a little previously on section at the start of your sessions where you go through what happened last time. So before the game, he takes a look over his old notes, he remembers what happened, and he gets it all down in a paragraph or 2. And he'll add whatever key important things that might have happened sessions upon sessions ago that might be important for this session. And it's exactly what TV shows do as well. If you're watching one, they have the recap. It's just little slithers of important information that happened before that is actually going to come into play in this episode. And writing out this recap beforehand does a few things. Obviously, during the session, it will remind the players what's going on. It can also set the scene or even foreshadow things that are about to happen. But it can also remind you, the DM, of what happened last session, because sometimes it's easy to forget things. So just by sitting down and looking through your notes, you can be like, oh yeah, I should bring this back, or this has to happen this session. And also just the act of having this as like a ritual that you do before the start of every session, it can become a moment every week where you pretty much signal to your players that like, hey, D&D starts now. This is the recap. Stop talking about how hard your day at work was. It's game time now. Crawford, who's the other super consumer-facing DM/game architect at Wizards of the Coast, actually asks his players to recap the story for him at the start of every session. And this can be a great alternative. I still think it's important for you to write out your own recap just for yourself to make sure that you remember all the fine details, and also because you can't always trust your players' memories, but getting your players to recap and tell each other what happened in the last session is actually a great way to get them more invested in what's going on. Knowing that they have to recap every single session probably will make them take more notes because it's like a little test, and it can also make them feel like they're just more part of the world and are driving the story forward too, because you're not telling them what happened, they're telling you. And it's also a cheeky way to find out what the players remember the most, or paid more attention to, or get get more excited about, because that's the stuff you want to put more of into the game. Just double check with your players beforehand if they're cool with recapping, because not every table's down for it. Okay, let's take a look at Mathew Mercer, who says that preparation is the key to not being unprepared. And by that he means pretty much be prepared for the unexpected, which is obviously impossible because it's the unexpected, but you can try and predict the unexpected. When planning your session, make contingency plans. What if your players decide not to fight that boss or take that quest? Well, maybe this or this could happen, or this and this could happen. You don't have to plan out entire other sessions depending on whether the players decide to go left or right, but just know that occasionally things are not going to go your way. In fact, more often than not. And just by thinking of a few contingencies, just by having one single thought on like what if, it'll put you in a much better place to improvise the issue or similar issue if it does indeed happen in the game, because it's not simply just taking you completely off guard by surprise. And speaking of when this happens in your games, when your players give you a curveball, when you end up in a place that you've done zero prep for, because you just didn't think in a million years your players would get themselves in this situation, learn to embrace those moments as a DM. Learn to enjoy when you lose control over the story, because that's when it becomes a true collaboration. It's one of Matt Mercer's favourite things, being somewhere he's not prepared for, and then just yes-anding and seeing where the story takes him. Matt also has the preparation advice of don't railroad your players. Now, for me, when I say railroading, I mean, would you get frustrated if your players went off your story beats or did something unexpected? And can your players' choices actually affect outcomes? If your players can affect outcomes with their choices, and if you are fine with things veering off track a little bit, you're not railroading. But actual railroading, the thing that has negative consequences, where you have a very clear idea of what is going to happen and it has to happen like that, this usually happens because of one of two things. It's either that the DM didn't do enough prep under preparation, the DM's kind of sat down for 20 minutes and been like, okay, cool, I want this to happen, this to happen, this to happen, this to happen, and they haven't thought about anything else, and they just like, this is how it has to go. Or two, it could be because of over preparation, the opposite, where the DM has sat down for hours upon hours upon hours planning out every single little detail, and like they think it's awesome, it probably is awesome, and they find it so hard to let that go because what a waste of their time otherwise. And the best way I've come to think about pushing a story forwards without the idea of railroading is to think less of it like a train track and more like a highway. Because as a DM, you do want to tell a good story, and a good story has structure. You know, it has a beginning, middle, and end. And you may have really cool ideas for events to happen along the way that you really want to see come into reality, and that's fine. So be on a highway, driving towards those destinations, and sometimes your players will make a choice, and you'll have to change lanes, or stop at a service station for a bit, or even get off the highway completely, take the scenic route, go on a detour, and then get back on the highway further down the line. So when prepping, forget about the one track and think about multiple lanes. Now, I think Matt Mercer's best DM tip, and just one of the best DM tips I've ever heard, is to keep a list of fantasy names nearby. When you're prepping, come up with a list of random names that would suit the location your players are in. Then if your players veer into an area that you didn't expect them to go into and you didn't prep anything for it, and they start talking to an NPC and ask that dreaded question, hey, what's your name? You can just grab your list, choose a random name off it, then improvise the rest. You also get the added bonus of your players thinking that you prepared way more than you did, because they're like, whoa, he even fleshed out this random dude? You can also, of course, take this to the next level, make just a full table of NPCs full of details, their descriptions, their personality traits, little side quests they could have. Then if you ever need to use one, just cross it off the list. It takes a lot more effort, and you might be veering into the over-preparation side of things here, because really this list is like a break in case of an emergency for NPCs who might have 3 lines. But if you are the type of DM who wants to be prepared for anything, very useful. Aabria Iyengar has a great method for prepping that really is worth talking about. She uses flowcharts, and I think she mostly uses these for her bad guys in combat encounters, where she has like a piece of paper, and at the top of it she has what she would want her villain to do first. For example, if she's playing a barbarian, rage. Then below you'd have the next ideal thing you would do that turn, which if your bad guy's a barbarian, it's probably moving close to like the tank and attack twice. Then you can remind yourself next to that you do extra damage because you're raging. And then underneath that you could even remind yourself to say like a line that your bad guy needs to say, like, you'll never take me alive. And this can be done for a ton of different classes. For example, if you were playing a rogue, you could have all the cunning actions at the top, and then a kind of, do you have sneak attack? Like, do you have advantage in attack, or do you have an ally die next to the target, and then you can have like a yes or no coming off. If no, attack as normal. If yes, add sneak attack damage. Then under that you can have a section that says, if you have not used a bonus action yet, you can do your cunning actions again, or take another bonus action. Now, I thought this was kind of silly when I first heard about it, because maybe if I was a beginner player and I wanted just an easy to read sheet for what I can do during combat, sure thing, but I've got all the information as a DM. You know, our monster stat blocks aren't as complex as a player's. But tomorrow I have the last session in my current campaign, and it's the big boss battle, and this guy has lair actions, legendary actions, reactions, multiple attacks they can do, and yeah, it's all there on the stat block / a block of text next to it. But when I put it out into a flowchart, everything became so much easier for me to understand. You see, I have a really bad habit when I'm DMing combat encounters, where I care so much about the players having fun and about running it smoothly and getting through it quickly that I always forget to do obvious things, like rage as a barbarian. Then at the end of the combat, I'm like, man, that was fun, but my players kind of stomped me there, and I don't understand how. Do I just have to make these fights harder? And in reality, no, I just need to play smarter and better and utilize everything my NPCs can actually do. And that's really all these flowcharts are. They're taking the information on the stat block and putting it into just like digestible visual information and putting it into like a preferred order. So my boss flowchart looked like at the top of the round, I should do 1 of 3 lair actions. Then on my go, I should move and then do 1 of the 2 attacks. Then under that, I should say something in character to drive the story forwards and, you know, make the combat less just combat. Then under that, I have a section of legendary actions that you can do at the end of other people's turns. Then under that, I have a section of stuff I can do if my character is attacked. And honestly, it accomplishes 2 things. The first one is that now I can just look at, oh, it's my go, or oh, I've just been attacked, can I do anything? And just see it way quicker. And the second thing is, just by transferring all that information over onto another sheet of paper, I now understand the stat blocks way better, and I understand like how the flow of this battle is going to go, and I can see the best tactics to use. It really is such a great exercise more than anything. Okay, let's talk about some DM tips from DM Mark Hulmes, who just recently finished the Baldur's Gate 3 actual play with the actual voice actors playing their actual characters. It's honestly amazing. And Mark has some great tips for prepping for games as well. The first is to take inspiration from other things in life. Watch and listen and consume media in a ton of other forms. Stuff you like, then don't be afraid to borrow from it. Popular TV shows are popular for a reason. Popular games are popular for a reason. And you can take character ideas or plot points or big moments from this other media, change it a little bit, put your own spin on it, and place it directly into your games. I'm not saying steal it completely, don't just, you know, have a red wedding from Game of Thrones in your next session. But yeah, you can take the idea of it, the feeling of it, the impacts of it, and then massage it into a different shape and place it into your games for sure. And actually, I often personally find that my players love it when I do something very similar to like a show that we're all watching, or introduce like a character who's very similar to a character from, you know, something we all know, because then my players are just like, oh man, he's just like that character from that anime, or it's just like that moment from that movie. And you know, it's your home D&D game, it's not like you're gonna get sued for copyright infringement. But of course, tailor this for your own players, because just because my players like it, maybe yours might not, but you can definitely test it out and see if they do like it. Speaking of liking, like this video. And Mark has another bit of great advice for prepping, and that's be invested in your own games. Prepping a session will be so much more efficient and you'll get so much more out of it, and the end result will be so much better if you are invested in the story, in the NPCs, in the player characters. But being a DM can sometimes feel like a chore, and we can put our players' fun above our own. Or sometimes the direction of the campaign just isn't going where you thought it would, or just isn't as fun as you thought it would be for you. And this can lead to you feeling bored or uninterested in your own game. And that sucks because you'll put less time into prepping and the game will suffer because of it. But there is a way to get that investment back, and that is to change things up. If you're running a pre-written adventure it's okay to scrap it. Find another pre-written adventure and just jump in halfway through there and just sew it together like some weird Frankenstein's monster. If it's your own campaign, even easier. Just veer away from what you're doing and go explore someplace else. Your players don't actually know what you've got planned, so you can do whatever you want. You can prematurely end plot points. If you had a big bad who you just don't like anymore, have another big bad come in and kill that big bad, and then have another plot going on. Hell, just take the characters to a whole new setting. As long as your players are still having fun, you can do whatever you want. The DM is a player too. So obviously if the DM is invested and excited, they're gonna put more time into prepping, then the entire game goes to the next level. And probably the best advice when it comes to prepping for D&D is try and enjoy it. And if you're in one of those rare situations where your players love the game right now and you as the DM just are not feeling it and you feel trapped and you can't change it because why take that fun away from the players? It's not worth it. Just talk to your players about it. Let them know that you're not enjoying it. Find out why they are enjoying it, and then as a group you can pivot somewhere else where you get the best of both worlds. Something for you, the DM, and continuing doing the thing that they enjoy. You can do anything in D&D. So you can find a thing that everyone at the table enjoys, and then you can do it. Don't waste your time on anything where even just one player or the DM is not having fun. Just don't waste your time on it. And now let's look at Brennan Lee Mulligan. And I won't lie to you, a lot of you won't like this advice, but it's a hard truth. When Brennan preps for his sessions, he only really has to concentrate on putting the work in to really important stuff, like the moments, the ideas, and the things that really make his players and audience go, wow. And he doesn't really have to worry much about all the other stuff because he relies so much on improv to fill in those gaps between. And Brennan has some actionable advice here, something that you can do to get better at improv. And the advice isn't just to get good. Well, actually, it kind of is, but he tells you exactly how to get good, and that's by putting in the time. Play a lot of D&D. And when you play D&D, try and improv as much as possible. Push yourself out of your comfort zone and just keep trying and trying and trying. It's like a muscle that you build up. The more you do it, the stronger it will get. You can also research and watch videos on improv techniques and start using those more and more in your sessions. But the best way to get better at improv and therefore react quicker in games, come up with more entertaining scenarios on the fly, and yes, do less prep work, is, I'm afraid, to take improv classes, which you can just Google and hopefully find one near you. And this is some of Brennan's advice that I think is so good that I haven't taken yet, because improv classes scare me, but I do want to do them, and hopefully I can overcome my fear and get some courage and give it a go one day, because I know it will make me a better DM. I'm not going to go backwards, it will only make me better, and that's the truth of the matter. I see a lot of people when they look at Brennan Lee Mulligan be like, oh yeah, of course he's an amazing DM, he's like an improv comedian, but what can we mere mortals do? And the truth of the matter is that you can build up the same skills he's built up. I mean, it might take you a long time to get to where he is because he's got so much experience in it, but you can start on that path and see results. Let me know in the comments if you want to take an improv class or if you have taken an improv class and if it's helped you as a DM. Also, if you have a D20 nearby, give it a roll. And if you get over a 15, watch this next video. And don't forget to add your modifier, it's +14.